On June 28th in 2012, I walked into Holly Cove to cool off. I was 14, and when I came back, they told me a year had passed. The police said kidnapped and drugged, but I passed every lie detector. This is what really happened. June 28th in 2012, a record heat wave in St. Louis hit 108 degrees Fahrenheit, and a teenager named Savannah E vanished from a lake of the Ozarks Cove, reappearing a year later. When she turned up, the official line was kidnapped and drugged. She passed every lie detector, and a neighbor saw her at dawn, palms cupped like she was catching water. In 2019, a classmate recorded her story. You'll hear it right now. I was born in 1998, so in 2012, I was a teenager, and we went to the lake of the Ozarks pretty much every summer because my father's boss owned a cabin there and would let us use it for 2 weeks every year when Dad had a vacation. And I didn't know that the cabin was right on the edge of the cove that people should have avoided. See, Dad and Timmy always went fishing, and Mom used to sit by the lake and just relax. And sometimes I fished. Sometimes I just explored. I liked the lake, and I also had those silly romantic fantasies that kids do of experiencing things of truly great importance all the time. You know how youth is like that. I guess I'm still like that, where I saw the whole world through the eyes of melodrama. It wasn't until I came back that I learned you don't go in Holly Cove because of the bells. Holly Cove, it's just something that people call it. I don't think that's an official name at all. And I guess it's named Holly Cove because, well, there's a house underneath it. When they built the Bagnell Dam, it created this lake, and they were supposed to make sure everyone was out. And the story is that the engineers were wrong about what the water would do, so they weren't really prepared for some of the places that became coves. They didn't bother telling Holly's folks that they needed to evacuate, and then all of a sudden, the house was underwater. Nobody knew for sure if Holly was killed, but I guess back in the 1930s, they didn't really have divers to check the same way that they do now. Anyway, sometimes people hear bells right there at Holly's Cove. I never did hear bells, but then when I found out about it, I wanted to hear them. I went in that cove all the time before. Of course, after I came back, there's no way my parents were going to let me anywhere near that lake. I guess I just haven't gone back there since moving out of the house. I was so hot that day. You know, the kind of hot that's just so hot, it feels like every part of you is just slowly simmering. And with that kind of heat and the lake right there, the humidity made it so that I wore that heat like an undershirt. Even stripping layers, it wouldn't help. Anyway, I was right there at the cove when I met Eagle. I thought his voice was a whole lot better than Bell's anyway. I saw him first. Well, I didn't see him. Not as a man. Not at first. It was more like this distortion in the heat. It was like a ripple over asphalt on a boiling day, except it just took a form. Maybe the ripple didn't take the form, but he just appeared in the midst of it. The shadow stretched long across the sand and dirt, and his shadow stretched like that, even though the sun was almost directly overhead. And for just a blink, his shadow broke. The elbows were the wrong way, the fingers were too long, and then normal again, and the birds grew silent. And until he arrived, I didn't even realize they were chattering. Whatever he wasn't human. He only wore pieces of old stories like a costume. I guess my silly romantic fantasies made it easy for me to follow Eagle to his village. He arrived and he was all dressed up in deer skins and buffalo skins. I just wanted to be treated as an adult. He wasn't a boy. He was tall, but wrong proportions, like someone sketched him from memory. And when he fixed on me, I just followed him. I fixated on him. More awe than crush. It seemed to me that the man just stepped out of the waves of heat. And when he arrived, the temperature cooled all around me. You know that feeling when it's really hot in the afternoon and then you walk into an air-conditioned building? That's how it felt to me when he arrived. And that feeling was wonderful. But on the other hand, it was kind of a relief that also frightened me. It was sort of like sinking into nice cool water, but then realizing it's a lot deeper than you expected. The first thing Eagle said to me was, "You're supposed to be here, and you're supposed to come with me." I mean, can you believe that? When you're a teenager and the older voice says words like that to you, it's a pretty powerful thing. I mean, you have to realize that the heat made everything seem powerful. Like, how can I explain that? The heat was so horrible that when a cloud passed in front of the sun, you thanked God for that cloud. And then this person showed up and the heat seemed to disappear. And then the day didn't feel so heavy or thick with fire, but instead it felt free and filled with joy. Eagle said, "My village, it's very close." I told myself he was an entertainer or something, because the lake always did have carnivals and there were shows and such, and I thought that was probably what was happening. He was a cast member or something, and he liked staying in character. Who knows? Well, I think I would have liked anything Eagle did, so I was happy to say, "I don't know. It's really hot right now. Maybe I should just stay in the shade." And that wasn't me being coy at all. And when he arrived, everything felt better, and I didn't want to leave where it was cool and nice. The day was really hot. Old timers called it the devil's breath. Heat that makes people see things and fight each other. But right there, staring at Eagle, who looked like he just stepped out of the air and brought relief from the devil's breath. Well, I guess I didn't really want to go anywhere when it would be like leaving an air-conditioned building again. I don't know if I thought in those terms, but I was really, really happy where I was. And the Eagle said, "We're children of the middle waters, and that's what old timers call the people here. It'll be cool in my village, and I want you." I think that made the difference to me. I don't want to say that I was mesmerized or hypnotized or something, but there was power in his voice, and when he referred to his people as the children of the middle waters, that felt to me the same way that it might feel if I stumbled upon some elves or pixies or some other fairy race. Significant. You know, that's a good word. Everything about Eagle felt significant to me. Anyway, I told Eagle that I would like to visit his village, and I kept thinking about how jealous my friends would be at the end of the summer when I told them all about my time with him. It really felt impossible to escape a sense of powerful importance to this whole situation. Eagle was more than happy to take me from the shores of the lake through a mile or so of woods and streams. At one point along the walk, I stumbled, and he didn't even seem startled as he caught me by the arm, and he was very strong. But his hand felt too smooth. It felt almost like he wore gloves, but he didn't. And I stared right at his hand. It was normal, just too smooth. And as I stared, his skin shimmered just like the heat ripples. For just a moment, it was dark and glossy. I didn't believe what I saw, I guess. I was frightened. But then he let go of my arm and it was all normal again. And we walked from there to an honest-to-goodness river village under the heat. And it felt like a village pulled from every story that I'd ever heard about life along these valleys. People once prayed for rain when summers broke the land. And when the heat ruled, the world was out of balance. It wasn't out of balance here. I remember stepping off the grass to where the ground was cleared, around an oval clearing. All around the clearing were lodges, long rectangles of wood and stretched skins. And elsewhere you might see the skin tents, but here they were just long lodges. And then they looked at me like visiting royalty. You know what I mean? Any girl, I think, has fantasies about being more than what she is. We daydream about finding out our parents raised us for a king who had to hide us away to keep us safe. That sort of thing. We all try to find a way to be special in our daydreams, don't we? Well, in that village, I was special. And when I got there, they sang and they moved and laughed. And I felt happy just seeing them and let out a little sigh. And for just that moment, the village fell silent. Every face turned to me like the way that deer freezes and investigates a sudden noise. I felt more exposed than I ever felt in my entire life. But then, it all started up again. The laughter and the singing and the happiness, and an eagle ushered me along, and we ended up by one of those lodges where he sat me down on some of the skins, and they were these thick hides, I think. And I could smell the meat cooking, and there was something really powerful about all that too. It was like a family campout, if that makes any sense. He tore open a bright orange fruit and passed me pieces, sweet, cooling, and wrong. When he reached back in, his nails flashed pale and pointed, quartz thin, and then just normal again. And then he left, and I just sat there on those thick hides for a while before he came back. And this time he sat down with me, and we ate together. We didn't talk for a long time, but then he said, "You should stay here with me." Now, I was foolish. Keep that in mind. And still, I didn't understand much of anything, so it never occurred to me to think that he might have meant anything other than what I would do right then and there that day. Stay here with me meant right now, not anything more. I said, okay. And then we just talked more. He talked a lot about rivers, but not about the lake. Whenever I talked about the lake, he smiled, a really faint smile. It was like he looked at me like I was just a child. And something about that lake made him think that I was naive or silly. All those feelings about me being special and important would disappear when he did that, and I would desperately try to get them back, talking to him about the fruit that he brought me or about the lovely lodges or anything at all that took that faint smile from his face. It was when I talked about the devil's breath that his eyes widened a bit. He said again and again that I was meant to be there, and I guess I got caught up in feeling important because of that. It was right around then when Eagle called over some others. Eagle sat, and I watched as these other men walked past us, and some of them led horses, and some of them carried baskets, and I think one had a joint of venison, and I felt in a daze. I didn't really understand anything at all, but what I knew was something significant was happening. Finally, the others walked away, and Eagle said, "All of these will be delivered to your family." I couldn't answer. I didn't understand it at all, and then Eagle's words confused me. "And they will have the gifts, so they never forget you. I must prepare for tonight now." "Tonight? Tonight?" I asked. "What do you mean?" And this time, Eagle's words sent a chill through me. "Tonight, we bind you to the water." Those words hung heavily in the air just like heat ripples. Heavy, hot, and inescapable. It wasn't just the meaning. As he turned to leave, I saw his face. That wasn't a man's face that I saw. Not quite, anyway. The features rippled. And I know I keep using that word, but you know how it can be just so hot that the heat is really the only thing that you feel. And that's what it was like. Even in that cool village that offered such relief, the heat was still ever present. That new face was long, noble, but in a predatory way, with dark eyes like stones from the lake floor. "Tonight we bind you to the water." Those words, like ripples, clarified everything, and as he walked away, things fell into place. I knew he meant for us to be bound that night, and suddenly the idea of gifts to make sure my parents didn't forget me felt really terrifying. It all felt oppressive again, like the cool air and the sweet and savory smells of the village weighed on my shoulders to keep me in place, just like the devil's breath kept me seated by the shore in Holly's Cove. I missed that heat now. I made so many deals with God as I sat there. I would do my chores without complaining. I would volunteer every year for the Thanksgiving baskets from the church. I would do housekeeping every week for Maggie, the old lady across the street who couldn't get around very well. Keeping my room clean, studying, never being a smart mouth, you name it. I promised God that I would do that if I could just escape. I don't know how it happened that somewhere along the line I realized that I couldn't escape if I didn't get up off my rear end. It still felt oppressive, but by then I'd convinced myself that the cool air was really chilly and I was kind of freezing, and I longed for the heat. I thought I heard the lake again, but the sound was far too close to be that. I could hear the lapping of water against a dock, or maybe a wooden hull, but there was no way for that sound to echo through a forest. And then suddenly came the smell. It wasn't the smoke from the fires. It wasn't the sweet fruit. What I smelled was watery decay. The fish cleaning stations on the public docks, the trunk of the car when all the fishing gear was removed. If walking in the devil's breath felt like wading through molasses, walking now felt like thawing far too gradually. I just walked without paying attention to direction. I walked from where I sat between two long lodges, and as I walked, I felt the village pulling me back. It was like hands on my legs and my arms, but I fought through it, and I finally stepped away from those lodges. I could move faster then, and I did. It was like a slow jog, but every few feet I felt myself grow looser and faster, and then came the shouting. My heart sank as I heard it. I looked back and I saw Eagle. He looked ashen and desperate. He called for me as others gathered around him, and now I heard only their old words. It seemed strange that he'd spoken English before and now didn't. I stared, but they ran, and my body took over. I screamed as I ran, and I ran like I'd never run before. I had no idea of what direction, but I heard water, and I knew that would get me back to people who would stop the kidnappers. You can imagine my confusion when I came across a river rather than the lake. I stared in wonder, but only for a moment, because the shouts from behind me grew louder. I had no choice but to dive into that river, and something strange happened. The cool water around me felt like it knew me. I know that sounds strange and silly, but it seemed like it knew me. Like it knew the shape of my body and how to flow around me. I surfaced, staring back at the shore, and when I did, I felt the devil's breath again. The heat was all around my face and head, but the water was cool and wonderful. The villagers stared at me. They all wore a bitterly disappointed expression, and the eagle stood on the shore with the others. He looked angry, very angry, and his shadow showed something bizarre and frightening. His arms were too long, with elbows that bent the wrong way, and claws instead of hands. Empty holes for eyes. I tried to scream. I couldn't manage that at all. I didn't understand any of that, but I heard a shout of, "Hey, hey, hold on." And I turned and I saw a man in a fishing boat. I don't think I've ever been so glad to see someone. And he got to me and he pulled me into the boat. And when I looked at that shore, it was empty. But there were signs and there were people wearing modern clothing. I looked around and I realized that I was close to the big dam there, the Bagnell Dam. The man took me to a dock, and then when I got out, I asked if I could use his phone to call my dad to come pick me up. I guess everyone knows the rest. I called Dad and found out that I'd been missing for almost a year, and not just gone for a few hours. For a while, I was the kind of local celebrity that some missing kids become, and that's the end of it. Some people say that I was drugged. In fact, that's what the police said, to give themselves explanations, especially when I kept passing their lie detector tests. And you know, in the beginning, I would pass a mirror and I wouldn't see my reflection but the shimmer of water. Not heat, but water. It rippled. Most nights now I can handle, but when it's especially hot, I kick the blankets off. I dream. I dream of cool shadows. I dream of a voice whispering into the heat. And I wonder if he dreams of me too. You know, the old stories say that with the devil's breath, the air grows thick, but the walls between worlds grow very thin. I don't know about that, but I can tell you, they never found a village, and there was never a troupe of actors performing for a show. Most people who hear my story don't believe me. The ones who do believe me, they always say that I must be really happy to have escaped. They say I'm like a final girl, and I don't really like that very much. They tell me I must be really happy to be free of the devil's breath, and I'm not. And there's one simple reason. I never escaped the heat. It's always hot. I'm always burning up. The snow is piled up outside of the dorms, and I'm still burning up. I'm always drenched in sweat and trying to breathe hot, thick air that's in my lungs. I killed the radiator, 49 degrees last night, no blankets, still burning. The only time I feel normal is during heat waves. If the temperature is really above 100, I'm fine. Only then does the fire under my skin match the fire in the air. That's when I remember what it felt like to cool down while I sat with Eagle. Sometimes when it's hot enough, I can almost see him, and I whisper into the shimmering heat, longing to hear him call to me again. Sometimes I step outside when it's snowing and hold my arms out, and the flakes vanish on my skin, little puffs of steam, lifting off me like breath. If that air ever feels like a doorway to you, say where. For more scary horror stories, please share and subscribe.